What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the remote front office. We are going to be going over today. We have seen the first two games of the Pacers Celtics game, or series, I guess I should say. And then we will also be covering game one of the Wolves and Mavs series. A couple of quick things. Be sure to make sure to like, comment, subscribe. We are Monday and Wednesdays around here. Another thing I want to mention is this is being recorded right after the end of the Pacers Celtics game. So there was a tweet from Woj about Halliburton went out late in the game. He did not return. It was kind of made on the broadcast, and nobody really knew what was happening. And then we got the news that it was related to his left hamstring, which has been bothering him. And we are unsure as of right now. Again, by the time this comes out, there is a real possibility that maybe we know a little bit more on his status for Game 3. But as of right now, we don't know a whole lot other than he didn't finish Game 2. I want to start with Game 2 of Pacers Celtics. I understand it's kind of backwards, and then we'll go to Game 1. Just because Game 2 is a little fresher in the mind. So, um, one thing I will mention that they mentioned kind of at halftime is the Pacers have turned the ball over in a really unlike them fashion this series, right? They had 22 turnovers the first game, and I believe they were already at 10 by halftime. I think it's nerves. I also think it's just the noticing their general body language. I think it's just the moment, right? Where every possession matters. You could see when there was missed rotations, when there was bad calls, there were eye rolls, there was pointing, there was asking for a review every 5 seconds. There was just a lot of extra kind of cinematics that you expect from other teams, not necessarily from the Pacers, right? Normally they're kind of clapping at each other and saying, "Hey, let's get back into it. Let's do this. Let's do that." But instead, you saw a lot of like weird looks of you were supposed to rotate or um, what was that call? Just stuff like that, right? And even just a couple of times they didn't get back in transition, right? Al Horford got a really easy dunk at one point because off a make, the Celtics just threw a throw ahead pass and then it went to Al Horford, who was wide open in the middle. Nobody was back yet. Jaylen Brown got to the rim at ease. This was the Jaylen Brown game, at least for the first half. He was out there he went to the rim. He was aggressive. He was finishing through contact. He was playing on both ends of the floor. At one point, Pascal Siakam had really kind of started to get it a little bit more going in the third quarter, and they came out of a timeout, and all of a sudden, Jaylen Brown was guarding him when it was Tatum for a while. It seems like I've noticed for both teams, it seems like Al Horford's going to be the matchup that the Pacers hunt. At least early in the game, that was the primary focus, was trying to get him into some actions and try and get players like either Siakam or occasionally Halliburton in a one-on-one situation against him. And then for the other end, it seemed like it was Halliburton. For at least that first quarter and a half, it felt like every possession or every other possession, there was some sort of action involving Halliburton to get him on Tatum, to get him on Jaylen Brown, just anything and everything, right? The Celtics swung the ball a lot today, just the general. They would drive, everybody else was out on the perimeter, swing, 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 open three, Derek White, right? Um, I did also notice from the Celtics, they did go to the small ball lineup. I know people like Bill Simmons have been kind of asking for it. I was curious too, just because the Pacers aren't necessarily a great defensive team. So why not make it more difficult and go to a true small ball lineup of like three guards? I had kind of questioned a little bit. Um, but they went to, instead of that, they went to O'Shea Brissett playing center alongside Tatum and Brown with White and with Holiday because Luke Cornett hurt his wrist about midway through the game or so. So their backup center wasn't out there, and Al Horford kind of just they could tell that he was getting picked on, right? So they ended up bringing in O'Shea Brissett. O'Shea Brissett played pretty good, I would say. He didn't like stand out over anything, but he definitely didn't like necessarily make himself negative, right? I feel like he had a pretty good impact on both ends of the floor. So with that, I feel like that lineup was something interesting. I would still like to kind of see maybe like a Tatum at center type of lineup, and it's Pritchard out there instead of Brissett with the starters. But I definitely think we'll start to see that lineup more going forward, just as they're trying to kind of limit Al Horford's minutes in the series. But yeah, that was my primary things for Game 2 of the series. Let's go back to Game 1, right? We'll just treat this series and then we'll go to the next series, right? So game one, I so initially my thought was, right, Boston would come out, win by like 20, 25 game one, set a tone, set a message, everybody's locked in, let's get this going. We haven't played in a couple of days, let's get this done, right? And then I figured game two would be the game where Boston gets stagnant and goes through dry spells and kind of just doesn't quite get it going. And that would be the game that the Pacers win, right? Ended up being the flip, except the Pacers didn't win game one. Celtics did. You noticed that Celtics had a decent lead, about 16-point lead, and then all of a sudden it was gone, right? All of a sudden the Pacers kind of started to get in there and got in a rhythm and got in a groove, and the Celtics went stagnant on offense. There was a lot of standing around. There was a lot of one-on-one. There was a lack of ball movement. You know what I mean? There was just a lot of the bad Celtic habits that everybody knows exists. But we ignore them because we get games like tonight where the Celtics just play really well. Everybody's energized. Everybody's playing well on both ends. The ball's moving, that sort of thing, right? Um, the it looks bad now because Halliburton didn't play most of this fourth quarter, right? But the Halliburton at the end of game one was not great. He had a really bad turnover at about half court on Drew Holiday. Drew Holiday bumped him and he kind of lost his handle and just stumbled out of bounds, right? He also had a couple of other really bad, just not Halliburton type plays, right? Another thing for game one. I know it's been a big talking point around like JJ and the broadcast and stuff because so the Pacers were up 3, 8 seconds, right? Celtics inbounding under their own basket. And they asked JJ, do you foul? And JJ said, yes, I always foul. I agree with him, right? Especially in the playoffs. It's a 3-point game. It's 8 seconds left. I even texted him. I was like, watch this happen. They get the double pin down screen. Jaylen Brown's in the corner. Siakam doesn't get a great closeout, which I think is why he didn't foul, because he believed that the ref was going to call shooting motion regardless. And so instead, he kind of put his hands behind his back and just stood there and make sure, and was really emphasizing making sure that the ref saw that he backed his face away so that he wasn't in the shooting motion, right? The problem is that allowed Jaylen Brown to get off. I mean, it wasn't a super clean release, right? But it was clean enough to where he was able to rise up and just release it almost like it was a normal catch and shoot shot, right? And he makes that. They go to overtime. And then the Pacers offense kind of gets a little stagnant, run into some issues. Celtics pull it out. The one thing I will say about game one, as well as the second half of game two, right? The big talking point was that the Pacers weren't going to be able to shoot as well as they had in the last couple of series, right? Knicks had a bunch of injuries, and then they played Milwaukee with a bunch of injuries, so everybody thought that the shooting was kind of a fake, right? It was more of a regular season thing. Once you get into playoffs, everybody slows down, that sort of thing. I initially was on that kind of trend, and then I saw the Knicks series, and I'm still undecided for sure, but I understand it. They came out and scored 130 points in. Granted, it was overtime, but they still scored 130 points in a conference finals game against the second best defense regular season wise in the NBA. They run at a pace. Everybody can bring the ball up. Everybody understands. There's constant movement. You saw it tonight in game two. Halliburton got a screen from somebody, passed him the ball, and then took a screen off of that to go fade mid-range on a jumper, right? It was an open shot, and it's just the constant movement, the movement of people, the movement of the ball, the screens, the double screens, the rescreens, everything, right? Was just really kind of eye-opening for this. I still think now, especially with Halliburton in question, now with the Celtics kind of getting out of their building, I still think this goes 5. I don't think it's a sweep just because the Pacers, I give them more credit than that, of being able to, again, this is entirely dependent on Halliburton's status, obviously. But I still think that they are able to get up for these games. They pass, they're quick. I think Rick Carlisle is going to chew them out for having their head down at points, and I think they're going to come out swinging, right? I would assume they win game 3, and then the Celtics probably win the last 2 to close it out. But I think it's still going to go 5. I don't think it's a sweep. Now, let's go ahead and get over to the Western Conference. So Western Conference game 1, right? Ant talked about um, wanting to guard Kyrie, right? That was one of the first things he said in his interview going into the conference finals. I want to guard Kyrie. He guards Kyrie. There was a stat I was listening to Zach Lowe's podcast today. I can't remember who he was with, but they said that his average shot attempt was 22 feet, right? Out of everything he shot, his average distance of his attempt was 22 feet. If you're Anthony Edwards, that can't be the case. You have to get to the basket. You have to be aggressive. You have to force them to rotate. You have to force them to switch. You have to force them just to do something else other than trying to guard you one-on-one and get to the rim, right? I think he tried against Kyrie. It was a good effort, don't get me wrong. But Kyrie was Kyrie in the first half, right? And then Luka kind of came in the second half. The step back shot he hit over the Ant contest. Honestly, I can't judge Ant for that. It was the right play, right? He initially jumped at the initial one. Luka hits the step back. He's still there for the contest. Luka just did Luka things is the only way I can describe it. The fact that Luka looked as good as he did to end that game, the fact Kyrie looked as good as he did in stretches, is a little concerning. I don't want them getting a rhythm. I would rather have the role players beat me personally. Which kind of goes into the next thing. I believe it was Stan Van Gundy that would not shut up about the drop coverage. It was every 5 seconds. I understand where it's come from, but at some point, pick a new topic, please. Right? Every time I'm hearing the call, it was every other possession. He was like, "Oh, drop coverage. Oh, drop coverage. Let's analyze something else, Stan, please." Uh, the other thing that I would mention is I would like to see a little more doubling, especially if it's Luka or Kyrie in the ball handling situation and it's Daniel Gafford grabbing the role. I just don't know if I trust his playmaking in order to make the right read out of it. And also, I think I said it to begin the series. At some point, PJ Washington and Derrick Jones Jr. have to come down to earth, right? Maybe this is who they are. I don't see it, right? At least more so for Derrick Jones Jr. than PJ Washington. PJ Washington is very well could be who he is. Maybe this momentum continues and he does the same thing next year. I'm saying more for Derrick Jones Jr. We've seen what Derrick Jones Jr. is for most of his career, right? I don't think, granted, don't let him shoot wide open. Don't treat him like he's Ben Simmons. But that's where the help should be coming from, right? You shouldn't be drop coverage every time and letting Kyrie and Luka just shoot a floater, right? That's their bread and butter. They're gonna make that, right? It's gonna be more detrimental to you. I want to see the double and the extra rotation. Um, I also want to see Nickeil Alexander Walker. Love the guy to death. He's got to shoot better. The last 2 games now, I believe he's 0 for 10 from 3. You got to hit at least something, right, when you're out there. I also would like to see kind of more of the all defensive lineup for Minnesota. Not necessarily all defensive lineup, right? Cat or Nas play the 4. Gobert still at the 5. And then you have Nickeil Alexander Walker and McDaniels, right? Because ideally, what I'm trying to do with that lineup is I'm trying to get Ant out of having to guard Kyrie, right? Have Nickeil Alexander Walker do it for a little bit. Give Ant a chance to rest on defense for half a second. And occasionally have him be the rotation, right? Have him on Derrick Jones Jr. and have him come in and rotate. And then the guy can slide to the corner and the rotation can start from there, right? Have him be the rotator. Because I think, obviously, with his athletic ability, if somebody's going to go up with the ball, he's able to get there and recover, right? Um, the thing I'm concerned about for Minnesota, right? I feel like they played really well. My biggest concern is Dallas made 6 threes in that game and still won the game. That cannot happen. You made more threes than they attempted, and you did not win the game. Granted, Minnesota shot worse from the free throw line. Dallas shot really, really well. I think they only missed 1 free throw. But you cannot lose a game in which the 3-point disparity is as bad as it was in that game. It's not going to work, right? I also want to see more. I think Derek Lively understand that the Mavs have really emphasized trying to split the minutes down the middle with the Suns, right? I think if, especially Minnesota starts to double more, I think Derek Lively needs to start getting a little bit more minutes than Gafford does, right? I trust Derek Lively a little more out that role. I also think that he's a little bit better as far as dribbling out of the role, right? As far as being able to make that decision and kind of think in the 4-on-3 situation. I trust him a little bit more out of it, right? As far as game 2 goes, okay? I want to see Minnesota be more aggressive defensively, more doubles, more rotations. Just trust you guys to rotate, right? Stop giving up the lob. Emphasize that we are now rotating. We're doubling. We are not letting Luka and Kyrie get comfortable throwing lobs and these floaters and get into the rhythm that way, right? I want to force them to take the tough step back three. I know Luka hits it and every time he needs to, but I want to see it have to happen every possession, right? Not every once a quarter. I want it to happen every possession, right? Good contest, good fundamentals, and see where it goes from there, right? If I'm Dallas, expecting more of the doubles, I want to see more of the role guys step up, right? I understand Luka and Kyrie can do it. I want to go back to having PJ Washington and Derrick Jones Jr. and these guys win the game for us, right? And not needing Luka and Kyrie combine for 60, right? I want to see more of the bench. Hardy off the bench. He didn't play a lot of minutes, but as far as generating the offense, he did really well. He had several assists that were just perfect read and react. Here's where I need to throw it. It's done. It's a good shot, right? I want to see more of that out of them because it seems like Jason Kidd's going to play, 10, 11 guys to start every series and kind of figure out who's going to play in that series, right? I don't think we see a lot of Dante Exum. Tim Hardaway Jr. didn't score a point, which was kind of weird, but I wouldn't be surprised to see more of him out there. And I'm just kind of curious as this series goes on, who else from that Mavericks rotation gets cut out of it, right? But yeah, so that game is going to be the day you guys are viewing this. It'll be that night. I am getting this out a little bit early, but we will have that one as well as all the weekend games on the Monday episode. I appreciate you guys sticking around, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.